好，各位老师、各位同学，大家早安。不好意思，因为今天早上就是时间比较延迟一点，所以呢，我们接下来就要准备开始了。好，那如果有来的师长同学们，大概知道说我们昨天上课的形式呢，就是会有一些讨论，会有一些对谈。所以今天我们在一个比较更舒服的教室，大家可以就是更放轻松，然后可以尽情的发表意见啦，或者是跟大家有一些讨论。好，好。Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody again this morning. And it's Saturday, so you guys can just relax and enjoy the lecture today. We also have two sections, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And during the break, in the noon, we will provide you a lunchbox so you can make yourself comfortable and more than welcome to come join Dr. Lee because she will stay with us for the lunchtime. If you have any questions you want to ask her or you are not really comfortable raising your hands during the section, you can talk to her during the noon, okay? Okay, so just give ourselves and Dr. Lee a little applause, and we can get started today right now.
Good morning, everyone. Chào an. In my second language I have in my family is Malay, Bahasa Melayu, and we say Selamat Pagi. So the only other person that speaks Malay or Indonesia is Brian. So it's nice to be able to practice my Malay with him this morning. So as I shared to those who are new here, I'm ethnically Chinese, but I'm what we call a Straits-born Chinese, a Nyonya. Okay, so a Straits-born Chinese means that my family has been in Singapore, Malaysia for generations. So we have imbibed the Malay culture and food and language in our culture. So whenever I go to China or even to Taiwan, people will say, you are Lee Sensei, do you speak Chinese? Or they will speak Chinese to me. So I'm very sorry that I don't speak Mandarin. I always say that I'm too old to learn, but Brian has reminded me that you're never too old to learn languages, and that he said to me that if you learn a language, you will set off the possibility of dementia for 5 years. So that's why he shared the research with me, so I'm inspired by him. But there's another language I want to learn, which is Japanese, because my work in lesson study is borrowed from Japan. And so I've been traveling to Japan to learn from my Japanese colleagues and friends, but still haven't been able to learn the language. So I have two things to learn. I'm 65, so I've got hopefully many more years ahead, but hopefully, and that I will learn both Japanese and Mandarin, and that will set me back my dementia by 10 years. Anyway, first of all, those of you who were with me yesterday, welcome back. It's nice to see all the smiling faces again. And those who are new, welcome on a Saturday. And as Yi Ching said, yeah, you all deserve an applause on a Saturday. In Singapore, we never hold workshops and conferences on Saturdays. We work Monday to Friday, and Saturday and Sunday are reserved for the family. So we do not have anything on Saturday. And if we do have something, the ministry said we won't support you. We won't send our teachers to you. So we work very hard Monday to Friday, and then we rest. Well, for academics, we work all the time, unfortunately, almost 24/7. So again, today is an addition to yesterday. So those coming for 2 days will have new material today that's different from yesterday. But I'll build on some of the ideas that we had talked about yesterday. And those who are new, I hope your friends at the table will fill you in the course of the day. And so my focus today is on the second model of lesson study. Yesterday, I spoke about lesson study in the context of plan, do, see, right? We saw the planning in the video, we saw the observation, and we saw the discussion, right? And then we saw in that particular American video, the redo of the lesson, as well as the Singapore video, the redo of the lesson. So plan, do, see, redo. So we had that cycle, all right? This time, I'm talking about lesson study in a different model, which I talked about a little bit yesterday, but I will go more into it, which is lesson study in schools as learning communities, all right? And for many Taiwanese who have read Professor Manabu Sato's book in Chinese, you may be familiar with what this model is about, okay? So, and hopefully, one of the things I find difficult for me to learn about Professor Sato's model is that a lot of things are written in Japanese, and so in English, it's very, very little. So while the book has been translated to Chinese, translated to Vietnamese and Indonesian, it has not been translated to English, okay, because of copyright issues with the publisher in Japan, because so that has been something that we're trying to work out with the publisher in Japan. But we hope my role, Professor Sato is someone that I admire as a professor, because he's very grounded in the schools. He's really go to schools a lot and observe classrooms. And I just love the way that he observed classrooms. So I try to follow him to schools. And when I was in Japan in 2004 as visiting professor to University of Tokyo, that's where I learned about lesson study. And I followed both Professor Manabu Sato to the first pilot school called Hawanago Elementary School that had a reform and a turnaround. So I was the first Singaporean to see that school. And he brought me there, and I followed Kiyomi Akita a lot, also to schools. So that has been where I've learned. So what I'm trying to do is that Professor Sato is very much an academic and a philosopher. He's an educational historian. And what he sees schools, I'm trying to see is adaptation and contextualization to a country like mine, Singapore. So this year, I started a new pilot project to implement Sato's model, the first pilot project. So in my work, I learn by doing. I learn by trying out first and see what happens. And I think when we adapt, we contextualize. When we take something from another country, we have to adapt and we have to contextualize it to our own. So I am interested in this work because of two aspects that I deeply believe in as a teacher. One is listening pedagogy. Okay, as I grow older, I realize how important it is for me to listen to others, not just in my classrooms, but also in my life. So I'm trying to develop this habit and this discipline of listening. And the other one is something that I started in 1980s as an educator, which is cooperative learning. And over time, I've moved more to collaborative learning. So I started the cooperative learning movement in Singapore in the 1980s. I started the lesson study movement in Singapore in 2004. And I've just started this kind of little movement that I'm trying to do, which adds more understanding. So the reason why I moved into this is that my life's work as a teacher educator is to transform teachers, right? That's what we are as teacher educators. And when we transform teachers, we hope they will transform the classroom practice, right? That's why I do lesson study, to transform classroom practice. But when we transform classroom practice, we hope the whole school will be transformed. And that's where we want to get to in that vision of the school, all right? I'm doing it now, not for my children who already left school, but for my grandchildren, because I have 3 grandchildren. One is 5, one is 3, and one is 4 months. And while we say Singapore, every school is a good school, I think in some cases our schools can be better. And I like the philosophy that's behind this. So bear with me because I'm still a novice in this. I'm still trying ideas. And Taiwan is doing this work. So in fact, I would love to hear from you, those that tried these ideas in your own work, how you found implementing school as learning communities. So said, have you gone to Taiwanese schools? I did go to Taiwanese schools when I was here the last time. But after this meeting with you, I'm going to visit 2 schools that are implementing this. I wish I had gone before, but I couldn't come out earlier. So I'm going on Monday afternoon. 3 schools. I'll be going on Monday afternoon and Tuesday, 2 schools. So I'll be going to 3 schools to see and talk to them about how Taiwan is adapting and contextualizing this. So I think we can learn from one another in this process. All right? So for the workshop, I think those who were with me yesterday know this. I mentioned it at the beginning. Please be here 100% with me. If you can't, if you feel the need to get out of the room, some people cannot sit down. They need to walk about. Some people have a bad back. They must stand, and not sit all the time. Please just stand and walk around the room. It's okay with me, okay? If you need to use the restroom, just go out and use the restroom. So please listen with an open mind. I find it that in this group, we have different diversity of participants. Some of you are teachers in schools, our international students especially. Some of you are university college professors. So some of you who are college professors work with schools. Some of you do not work with schools. So I'm trying my best to see how I can meet your needs in your learning. Some of the ideas about listening, some of the ideas about collaborative learning can work with undergraduates. So you always start with your own classroom first. Okay, so that's the thing that we try to do. Respect all viewpoints, share, and as I said yesterday, don't worry about making mistakes. If I ask a question, we're here to learn from one another, so don't worry about your points of view, and just share whatever ideas that you have. At any time, please ask me questions that you may have. Any comments you have, just feel free to do that. So today, I'm doing this a whole day on school as learning community. So I have various objectives. One is to understand what exactly is school as learning community, and to understand the philosophy, and to really unpack the meanings of listening, pedagogy, and collaborative learning. And to some extent, to think about its benefits and challenges, and discuss ways to overcome these challenges. We probably may not go to 4 because of the group background, but let's at least do 1, 2, and 3 today. Okay? All right. Yesterday, I spoke about different models of lesson study. All right? So some of you yesterday saw videos of Plan, Do, See. Does it work? Oh. Sorry, I didn't test this. Okay, some of you saw the Plan, Do, See, Improve cycle yesterday. You saw videos about this. Okay, and today my focus is on lesson study for learning community. All right. For those who are new, let me just revise what this Plan, Do, See, Improve cycle is about, because some of you were not at yesterday's workshop. Okay, so let me then explain this to you. Okay, in the Plan, Do, See cycle, what they do is that when we have a group of teachers come together, when they come together, they collaborate as a lesson study team of teachers, whether in the school or whether in the university. College lesson study teams also happen. They really study the curriculum and they formulate the goals of the work. And when they do that, they always consider the long-term goals for student learning and development. So for example, if you're teaching Chinese as a second language to your students in the university, at the end of the time they spend with you in your classes, what do you want them to be able to do, right? If you are teaching fashion design in your university, at the end of your program on fashion design, what is it that you want them to be able to do? Both cognitively, socially, emotionally, whatever, in different dimensions. So that is very, very important. And in the lesson study work, when we get together to discuss, when we do a unit or curriculum unit, all right, we always choose a topic that's most difficult to teach? That's most difficult to teach. So many of you are experienced teachers. So let's get a sense. What is the most difficult topic for you to teach in your area of work? All right? So let's ask Yi Jing, who is teaching in the master's program. What is the most difficult topic for you, or difficult problem that you have as a teacher?
Since we are the program like internationally, we have students from different countries. So when I'm teaching like social development in terms of children in the children's stage, I think that's difficult because we need to consider different perspectives culturally. So that's not easy. Sometimes we didn't really understand the culture. Some of the culture is really maybe more for religious perspectives, but if we don't know that, we don't know how to communicate. Or like socially differences, sometimes that would be hard to consider all the possibilities.
Okay. So her context that she's teaching in an international program, students from different culture and child rearing, child development practices are different in different cultures. So she had to, as a teacher, understand the perspectives that her students bring to her. Now, when she's trying to understand the perspectives that students bring to her, what must she do first, you think, as a teacher? Discuss. Yeah, Nancy, she has to listen. Yeah, she has to listen, all right? So that's important for us as teachers. She has to listen. So she has to identify a topic. She has to deal with that difficulty. And one of the issues that she raised is that in the way that she deals with it in her design and planning is that she has to begin with listening to her students from different cultures. All right? We're going to ask international student teachers. We haven't heard from Martin yesterday much. So Martin is a teacher, right? So Martin, share, as a teacher, what is the most difficult topic that you had to do and teach over the years?
Okay, hello. I am from Paraguay and I'm teaching ICT subjects because I have a degree in computer science. For me, it's like difficult to teach a subject that is computer programming for my students because they like come from the schools with like poor previous knowledge. Also, it's like computer programming is like a very difficult subject, not only for me, it's also very difficult subject around the world. It's an universal problem to teach that. The researchers are trying to find new easy ways to teach that. So in my country it's more difficult for the reason that I tell you. Also it's like a very abstract subject. So that's the reason I find so many problems in teaching computer programming in my country.
Mm-hmm. So he's teaching computer programming, which is a kind of language, right? So computer programming is a kind of language, and we have several language teachers here. So we have a colleague who's teaching English, right? Language, am I right? Reading. Language, okay. Okay, maybe you share what difficulty you have in teaching your subject, and what was the topic if you were to do a lesson study team among your colleagues, what topic would you do?
Okay, I need to teach my students about teaching material of Chinese language because my student will become a language elementary school teacher in the future. So my problem is that I need to understand what difficulties that they might have when they want to design the lessons for the children. So as Nancy mentioned, that we probably need to listen to the students first. We'll I need to understand, okay, what they need first. So that I find that they do not, my students, because my students, the college students, they do not have any teaching experiences at school. So I need to make some scenarios to help my students to think, okay, when you try to teach, when you try to design one lesson, how you need to know what your children will need to learn, or what kind of problems your children might have. And then that will help them to understand and help them to design the lessons. So that's, I think that for when I encounter my new students, I need to understand what their background knowledge, or what kind of experience they have. And then that will help me to design or redesign my lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's moved on to kind of planning, okay? In his context, he's working with training students to become teachers, right? Yeah. So, pre-service program. We heard from Yi-Ching about graduate program. In this case, it's pre-service program, all right? And so he talked about, and also Martin talked about it, students' prior knowledge. So when we do the planning, when we look at the long-term goals that we want for our students, we have to come and think about their prior knowledge and prior experience. So while we talk about lesson study in the school context, which I'm most familiar with because of my work in Singapore, but when we talk about lesson study in the college context, like Yi-Ching and her group of colleagues teaching the master's program, they come together and they form a lesson study team. Now he's talking about his students preparing to become teachers. So therefore we talk about lesson study in the initial teacher education program, the pre-service program. There's also another area of work that lesson study can be applied to. So in pre-service programs, students go to schools, right? They go to schools and they teach and they have to plan units of work, curriculum, and so on. So the university supervisor or teacher can work with with the cooperating teachers in the school, because you have senior teachers in the school, right? And with the senior teachers or cooperating teachers in the school, you can mentor teachers. You can work with them to work with your students across schools and form a lesson study team or pre-service students during the practicum. And in Japan, they do this all the time. So in Japan, lesson study is done from the pre-service level. When students go to school, schools are already doing lesson study. So when they come in as practicum students, learning to teach, they do it with other experienced teachers, with the university teachers and supervisors, and they do lesson study. And here you develop the curriculum, you design work for your students. All right? So this is the context of graduate program, the context of pre-service program, and the context of lesson study that can be done as a teacher teaching students, right, in a school context. So you can do lesson study at different levels, all right? But the process is planning, study, planning, and then opening your lessons. So in the pre-service context, when your student teachers teach a lesson in a school, that can be open to other student teachers and to other experienced teachers, because they can form a lesson study team at the pre-service level. All right, so then you open the lesson, and then that's live. So the core of lesson study is that you have live lessons. So in the videos I shared with you yesterday on Singapore case and American case, you saw the teachers opening the classroom, right? And the lessons were live. Okay? And then we have discussion and reflection. And then you go back to the cycle. So you find that lesson study in the plan, do, see phase actually moves in a cycle. But as we saw yesterday, that what we learn from the lesson study cycle is not just based on one lesson. The principles can be applied to all lessons. So the idea that I had to understand the prior knowledge of students before they enter the class, the idea that my students come with different perspectives, and so I want to understand the different cultural perspectives that they come to my class, then I have to use the pedagogy of listening to them. All that can be applied to any lessons and anything that you learn. All right, so this is important to talk about the vision of education for this plan, do, see cycle. Okay, so this is to revise what we did yesterday so that you're clearer, because you will use this model and transplant it to school as learning community and see how different it is. Okay, So, it's not working. So Taiwan actually has started school as learning community. And I had this flight from a conference that Professor Chen presented in 2015. I think it was in Tokyo. So you find the book. Some of you have read the book. How many of you have read Professor Sato's book? I think that is the book. I think this is not working. I'm not sure why. Okay, so maybe I should point to this one. Oh, I have to use the moist. Oh, because of the nature of the screen. Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Oh, I can use it as a touch screen. Oh, wow, the technology of this room. Oh, wow. Okay, okay. So this is the book, right? This is the book. Because I walk a lot, so that's why I'm not tied to the screen, right? So the technology doesn't work for me. Or technology work for me. So this one is the book. How many of you have read this book? Okay, only one, two, okay, three of you. So you have read this book, so you're familiar. So in the sense, they have got the pilot class, the pilot school, and they have a big conference in 2015. So Taiwan has begun this work, okay, all right? How many of you actually work with teachers in the schools as professors in university? Nancy, anybody else work with teachers? Yeah, two of you, okay. So the rest of you just teach in the graduate courses here. You don't go out to schools and work with teachers. Okay, all right? Okay. All right, so this is the photos that she shared. And you see that in Taiwan, okay, in Taiwan, the children are working in groups because collaborative learning is very important. And you see the children in classrooms working in groups. So she shared these photos with us at this conference. Is this mode, collaborative learning, group work, is it pervasive in Taiwanese schools? Is it done a lot in Taiwanese schools? Collaborative learning, cooperative group work? Maybe Nancy?
That project started in 2011 until now.
Okay.
So it's considered a long project because usually the MOE project in Taiwan is about 1 or 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay. So this is pervasive, therefore, in New Taipei schools.
New Taipei City.
What about New Taipei City? What about the other parts of Taipei?
And maybe the city of Taipei also.
Okay.
Taipei City and New Taipei City.
Okay.
So for example, the 3 schools that you are going to visit, are they located in Taipei and New Taipei City?
I can't remember.
You can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, probably nearby around here. Yeah. Okay. But what about the whole of Taiwan as a country? Do you think this is pervasive in the whole of Taiwan?
Cooperative learning project, during our peak, there are about 800 to 900 junior high schools participated. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, it's a decision made by Ministry of Education. All of you should attend this project. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay then. Okay, so we do have a bit of cooperative learning being done. And there are some schools doing school as learning community, which I think are fewer schools. But we'll see what are the ideas are behind school as learning community. Okay? So this is his vision. All right? Okay, so school as learning community is both a vision, a philosophy, and activity system. Sato thinks that school is a place where children learn together. So because children learn together, that means it is collaborative learning. It's group work. Okay? teachers also learn together as teaching, learning professionals. So in other words, teachers learn together as lesson study, teacher learning teams, okay, or professional learning communities. And parents are involved in the school. Parents are actively participating in the schools, all right? But in Singapore, we are trying to involve parents in the school. We're trying to get parents more involved. And so in our schools, we have a parent support group, and they come in and they help in some of the activities that are within the school. We're trying to do more and more of that. But what do you think is the view of teachers towards parents? What do you think? How do teachers view parents? What do you think? Okay, even in Singapore or in your own context, maybe you talk in your group first. How do you think? In your own groups, you talk first. So let's get together. Okay? All right. Okay, let's get together. All right. So I put my hands up. It means you pay attention to me and all eyes on me. That's the quiet signal. All right? Okay. So let's hear from this group. What do you think how do teachers perceive parents? Because they were laughing, and I was wondering, it's a very interesting conversation here. Yeah.
Monsters.
Okay, maybe share what you mean when you say
Okay. I was the elementary school teacher, so I could make some comments. Okay, they like to get involved in your classroom. And when the teacher material is in the elementary school is so easy, so parents think, okay, I could provide some strategy, or I can teach you how to teach my students. Okay, that's the one way. And because for example, some of my children's parents are professors from the university, they would like to they like to give feedback about your teaching, okay. And the other is just some parents would like to ask you to give a field trip for their children. So you need to design some field trip activity for their children. But some parents from poor family, they don't like it. So you probably you need to find a balance between these two groups of families. So that's the difficult one. So anyways, I don't know, I just think of teachers just like a servant. You need to please all family, all parents, and then you could survive for the whole year. So I don't think it's easy, especially in Taipei City. So I think they're just the crazy monsters. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a view of a former primary school teacher himself. Let's hear from Ruth. Ruth, what do you think in your context, in your own country?
Well, it depends on the school, because if it's the top schools, the parents might be involved, but not to the extent that I've heard in Taiwan. And I think in most schools, we wish parents would be involved. Yeah, they're hardly involved. I think they think, oh, I send my child to school and that's it. I don't have to do anything else. And in some cases, like even in my school, the parents want you to parent their children because they can't deal with their children, so they want you to deal with them. So it's a very different situation in my country. As a matter of fact, when we have parent-teachers meeting, there are hardly any parents. So that's the situation.
So you had different perspective of different schools with different parents. So again, I think in this model, number 3 is very difficult. Number 1 is easier to get to. Number 2, in Singapore, many group work, collaborative learning has been there as practice, teachers that. But number 3 is really very difficult, okay, because of how teachers, I think, view parents, you know, and I kind of overheard Brian that they become like nuisance, they are monsters, you know, they're difficult to deal with and to please, and you have a big class of 40 children, they all have different sets of parents and from different backgrounds and so on. How do you please parents? All right. So it takes a very, very special teacher or a group of teachers to plan an activity that actually involve the parents. In fact, in one of the projects that I did in the primary school, they actually involved the grandparents. All right? Grandparents. So this was a social studies project, and it was about bridges in Singapore, the metaphor of a bridge. So it's a bridge across generations, grandparent with the school-going children. And grandparents are often not working at home, where parents have jobs and cannot come. So they designed a field work activity, and the children went to 2 bridges in Singapore. At the very old bridge called the Elgin Bridge, you know, where in the history of Singapore, in Raffles founded Singapore, that bridge has got horse carriages, it's very British, and so on. So the parents shared stories about the bridge to the children, the memory of the bridge to the children, you know. So as a child, we always go to Singapore River, and we always go to that bridge. So our memory is very, very different. So when they went to another bridge called the Helix Bridge, which is links to the famous building, Marina Bay Sands, right? Everything of the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. Then the children shared with their grandparents about Marina Bay Sands, all right? About Helix Bridge, and why is it called a Helix Bridge, and its design. So that activity is specially designed to involve grandparents. So I think you cannot allow it to come by chance. Oh, participate, be involved, you know. But you have to design. You have to design for this participation. And it takes a lot of effort on the teachers who want to do this kind of work. So that was a project that I facilitated and worked with the principal and the teachers to do this project in one of our primary schools. So this is some ideas that he has. Of course, all of us were educators. When we look at this vision, it really strikes a chord in us, right? Because we all want children to learn. This is UNESCO. All right, UNESCO, human right, a Declaration of Human Rights of Children, that all children deserve to learn. All right, they all have that. But the other thing is that we have to make sure that our children have high quality learning. All right. So for some of you who probably, I'm not sure because of your experience, but in some of the schools where in Singapore we sometimes have classrooms that are tracked and streamed. So you have the high ability kids or high achieving children, and you have the low achieving children, you know, in another class. And at the school that I was working with, I was interviewing 2 very good teachers. They are very, very good teachers. But when I interviewed them, they said they only want to work with classes of high achieving children, because they feel that it'd be more interesting to design the tasks that would challenge these children. Now, when they say that, what do they mean? When a teacher tells you that I only want to work with high achieving children, what is the underlying assumption behind what she shared in the interview with me? We discuss that point at your table.
Deliberately chose to allow
Let's come back. Let's come back as a class. Okay. I hear a discussion going on at this table. Maybe you share what you think are the underlying assumptions of the 2 teachers that I interviewed.
I was sharing my experience in my university because I didn't pay much attention to your examples. So my example here is in our department, we have 2 classes of students. So a few years ago, we got one class that's from English major. In high school, they're English major. Another one that's non-English major. So most teachers actually prefer the non-English major students. They are not so competent in English ability, but they have very good attitude in learning. They're kind of humble. They would like to learn everything the teachers teach. But for another advanced students, there's, I know this, that's not a big deal, okay? So students are at good level, competent, but because of the attitude, most teachers don't like to teach that class.
So that's the context of higher education, right? Where the children are different. This is in primary school. When the children come in as primary school children, the example that I shared with you. So let's hear, Brian, you want to share something?
I grew up in a small little town, 50,000. There are 2 English schools inherited from British times, religiously divided. I will not name them. my school chose, because the social economics is very different. The Chinese live in town. The Indians, they live out in the rubber plantations. So they take a they could be 10 miles from school. They could be 28 miles from school. Every day they take a public bus to school. So economically they are much lower. My school chose, my secondary school chose to take in lots of this kind of students, and the goal was to make sure the majority of them graduate with a high school general certificate of education. The neighbor school want to be a ranking school. They took only, if you apply transfer from another school, they only want the best students. So it's in Chinese, 精英态度. So after so many years, I am very proud of my school, because my classmates from the rubber plantation, they would never get a break in life and they not got an education at my school. So I don't care about this kind of concepts that you only work with the smart. And my teacher said, it's not hard to work with the smart kids. They are already up. You are not lifting them. It takes a great teacher to pull somebody up.
So I think that's another perspective that's shared by Brian, that for teachers who want to work with kids of lower capacity, it takes a lot more work. And to pull that person up, that's another person. But let's hear from the teachers on this table. Maybe Yafan, you want to say something?
Yeah, we just talk about in the primary school, if some teacher might not like a low achiever because they come from different family background, and they might have some different situations like ADHD, and for teachers it's really hard to deal with these different situations. Yeah, so maybe the number of students is the key. Yeah.
Think about class size, but I think the point that Yafan is saying, that it's really an assumption that, what is the assumption about kids of that background and kids of that capacity? And the thing is that the point that Sato is saying is that every child in the school deserves to learn. But not just deserve to learn, every child in the school deserves high quality learning. And opportunities are ample for that. All right? So sometimes when we look at what teachers do, is that when they design tasks, they will, in fact, we actually finished another research lesson before I came here. And the school, the teacher of the high achieving class or high said, and we were observing a class of middle ability or middle achieving, middle achiever. And then she said, gosh, I didn't know they could do this, you know, because the task was difficult. And she said, I didn't know they could do this. I thought they cannot do this. But when they observe, that's when they are confronted with their assumption that, yeah, these kids also can do this if they're given the opportunity. So I think that's what lesson study does, is that when teachers from those kind of classes who believe that kids can do certain things, when they see the lower spectrum of children and then they are surprised, then I think that's where some transformation change takes place in the way they look at children. All right, so this is the point that Sato raised, and I think that, in a sense, for many of us who are educators and teacher educators believe in this, the problem is to get this into the belief system of our teachers in the school. That's the hardest, you know, and whether lesson study can help them see things differently, okay? So there's 3 points about his school as learning community. He talked about public philosophy, democracy, and excellence. Now let's try to unpack that a little bit more as 3 canons. So let's see what it means. Okay. Public philosophy is what we do for lesson study. You have to open your classroom, right? So teaching It's not something that is isolated. In the old idea of a teacher, I teach in the classroom, I close the doors, nobody comes in, right? It's my private domain. It's what I do with the children. Only my principal comes in maybe once, twice a year to appraise me in my teaching, all right? But he says the idea is, the starting point is to open your classroom to others. So the idea of lesson study, because the heart of lesson study is live lessons, right? We cannot do lesson study unless teachers want to open the classroom to others. What the American researchers talk about, the deprivatization of classrooms. So that is an important point, because that is to him the starting point for having collegiality among teachers, you know, coming to each other's classroom. I read a Japanese teacher who shared this. Whenever I have a free period, I will enter the classroom of my colleague and sit and pretend to be a student. I thought, my, isn't that nice? That the teacher is so professional, he uses his free period to do this because he wants to learn from his colleagues. Okay, and he wants to learn from his colleague from the perspective of what it is like to be a student. So if you're not a math teacher, you enter a classroom that the teacher is doing mathematics for primary, and you then try to see things from the perspective of the student because you're not a math teacher, right? So we have this cross-subject sort of fertilization going on and dialogue among teachers. So this collegiality is really, really what Sato was trying to get at and what lesson study is trying to do, to open classrooms. And the video that I shared with you on the Singapore case, the head of department said, you know, teachers are now so used to having 7 teachers coming into the room, right? Yesterday's morning's video. Before, only one teacher, she said, the principal or the vice principal. Now, several teachers come in. So in the Japanese idea, and Akari was a student in a Japanese school. So she'd been a student and a participant in open public lessons, right? In your own school. How many people coming to observe?
I think all the parents came almost. So there are usually 40 students in one classroom, so it could be 40 or even 80 if we have both father and mother. So it could be 40 to 80 parents usually come to that kind of open class.
So what Akari is saying that not only parents involved in lesson study opening classroom, parents come to observe the open classrooms. How many teachers in Taiwan want to open the classroom to parents? Huh? All right? I think Singapore too, very difficult. Even in Singapore, okay, open to my colleagues, my teacher friends, okay. Open to parents, oh, it's difficult. But in Japan, they open to parents. So that's how open it is, all right? Not only is it open to parents and all that, but how many people will come to the classroom? She says 40, 80, so you have 40 children, so sometimes 2 parents come in, 80 parents come in, but then you have other teachers. So when they talk about opening, very public, the one that I went to, the first time I went, Hamanago Elementary School, guess how many people came for the open public lessons? Every year they have an annual open lesson at Hamanago Elementary School. How many people would come to observe the public lessons, you think? A lot. How a lot? How much is a lot? How many do you expect to come? Same amount of students, you think? So you have a school of 300, so you have 300 people coming, because the school is quite small. Okay, so you expect? But that school, about over 1,000 people come to the open lesson. So maybe at lunchtime I'll look for my slide to show you, because I didn't bring that in to show that school. I got to look. Okay, so over 1,000, you have Japanese teachers, teacher educators come from all over Japan and go to Hamnago Elementary School. And then all the lessons in the school is open. So we could go to any lesson in the morning. Any lesson, we can just go in, okay? And after we go in, we have a discussion with the teachers. And then in the afternoon, there's a lesson in the school hall, and it's open to everybody. So I will show you the photos that I took in 2004 when I was there. Okay, yeah?
After many years of schooling, so that's kind of tradition. And I don't know whether the parents feel that they want to go or they feel they need to go. Yeah, they have to attend. So that's what I'm just curious about.
Okay, that's a good question. I will ask my Japanese colleagues about that. Okay, nobody asked that question before, and I will ask them. But my sense is that from Japanese schools that I visited, the relationship of the school to the community around is very strong, because many children walk to school, am I right? Or cycle to school. And that relationship with the community is very, very strong. So a lot of the community colleagues, community people will come, and it's open to the community and parents, but also in the public lesson that I talked about, it's open to all teachers all over Japan. They will come and see the open lesson. So I will show you what it means. So that's how open it is, how public it is. But not every lesson is like that. It's just an annual open lesson day for that particular school. And some schools are very famous, and more people want to come. And they also come because Professor Sato is speaking and is a critical commentator, and they want to listen to him. So they also come to listen to him when he's a critical commentator of Kiyomi Akita. So they come to listen to the university professors too as commentator of the lesson. So that's the experience, all right? In Singapore, we haven't come to that, but we have sometimes in a public lesson that we have in a cluster of schools, maybe about 40, 50 people will come, teachers from other schools, all right? Okay, the other one is the philosophy of democracy, because Professor Sato is very influenced by the work of John Dewey. So the idea of democracy is a way of living for all members. So everybody, whether it's the teacher, in a school usually, there's a very strong bureaucratic hierarchical structure, right? Okay, so in the school system, organizationally, the principal, the vice principal, and so on, and the teachers, then the students and the parents, But his point of view is that every one of them are important participants, stakeholders in the school, equally important, living together, all right? So the idea of the respect for dignity and diversity of individuals. So this philosophy of democracy is something that he tried to introduce. And of course, the excellence is something that we talked about the quality of learning, high quality of learning, so that every teacher try to be the best both in teaching as well as student, the best in learning, and that he talked about learning as jumping. I'll talk a bit more about what that means, all right? So Professor Chen, I think, did a survey and look at schools as learning communities in Taiwan. And in her survey, maybe I'll show you. These are some photos of opening classrooms. So you have some opening classroom. I went to one school and we visited the school, and this is an idea of, the children in groups having a discussion, okay, and coming out with the formula. What is the formula of a circle? We all learned the formula of a circle in school, right? A circle is pi r squared, and we just memorize it. But the children here were learning how the formula came to be, different ways of what is a formula for the circle. How do we know that it's pi r squared? So they came up with different ways, and they had different ways of doing it, and the teacher then had discussion about that. So this is an example, but not as big as the school that I talked about. Okay, it's, as I said, common practice in Japan. We're trying to do it more in Singapore. So you have more of that, and more now, when we open the classroom, even the principal and vice principal come in. Okay. Teachers, when they open classrooms, do you want your principal to come in? And vice principal to come in? Not really, right? You have to let them come in. But this is a principal and a vice principal who believe in lesson study and a very close, trusting relationship with the teachers. Okay, so that is very important, the school leadership and how the relationship is. So in Singapore, we are trying to move a bit of that and involving principals and vice principals also in our open lessons. All right, as you would see also in Japan, principals and vice principals are also in the open lessons. Okay, this is Prof. Chen Li Hua perspective when she shared this with her. She says that when in 2017 she gave the talk about SLC in Taiwan. So you all began, I think 2011, 2012, SLC. And then, so she said that when she looked at the idea about democracy, she says that the public philosophy, you know, you get more coming out here, up to here. Okay, so more and more classrooms in Taiwan is opening up to others. Excellent. More and more Taiwanese teachers and schools are looking at designing tasks for high quality learning, but she says democracy is a problem. Okay, democracy in the classroom is a problem. So I think that perspective, that idea, is something that we have to unpack a little bit more, what it means to have a democratic classroom. What does it mean? So that's something that we have to think about more closely than just say, oh, democracy is one of the underlying philosophy and one of the canons, right? So, okay, and so she says that a lot of schools are doing school as learning community in Taiwan, but she says that the change is quite superficial. So 2017 was just last year when I heard her. And people are doing it like more formalism, she said, you know. So it's not doing it because they want to do it. They do it because ministry says to do it. There's money for the schools must do it. So principals must do it, otherwise their ministry officials get angry with them. So they are doing it in a formal way, not really believing in the philosophy. Okay, and often they mixed this with other models. And I think like many countries, even in Singapore, there are a lot of fads, right? Flavor of the month, as they call it. And a lot of schools jump on the bandwagon, you know, of a particular fad, right? So now in Singapore, a fad is positive education. There's a whole network of positive education. So can you imagine if the school is trying to do school as learning community and getting those ideas across to the teachers? At the same time, they have another model called positive education. And the teachers have to understand the philosophy of positive education. When there's some ideas in positive education that is similar to school as learning community, about caring, about taking care of students and so on. So some of the things are related, but schools have different models. So teachers are very confused, are very, very confused. So in Taiwan now, what is the latest fad for you? What is the latest flavor of the month or flavor of the year? Huh? Problem-based learning, okay? So problem-based learning is a lot done at university, in medical education. Okay. Okay. So the new national curriculum guideline is important. Schools are having those reform in curriculum, and that has to be implemented. But curriculum guidelines and changes is to do with the content and what to be taught in the school and so on, as well as some of the philosophy and why and how. So how do we help teachers make sense of new curriculum guidelines? Is that we use lesson study. Okay? So we use lesson study as a way of getting teachers to understand the curriculum guidelines. So we encourage teachers to use lesson study to make sense of the new curriculum guidelines, even in Singapore. All right, now we have assessment reforms. So we are trying to say use lesson study for teachers to understand how to do formative assessment, you know, rather than just summative assessments. So we do that sort of thing, yeah?
Because she mentioned that the lacking of philosophical thinking of democracy, because probably in primary school or secondary school, because of the hierarchy you mentioned, the principal or maybe some director, then the teachers. So they have to follow the order to have the lesson study. But according to Chen's observation, that's because of the hierarchy, the authority, so most teachers would teach in that way, but they kind of make it shallow and superficial. But in contrast, in higher education, there's no strict hierarchy. So the teachers get the freedom, or we can choose whether we want to do it or not.
Yeah.
But because of the different subjects, so that's another problem. It's hard to have the SL because we all, even in the same department, we teach different courses. So it's hard to have people to share their teaching experiences. So it's quite interesting in primary and in higher education, we are facing different, I won't say problems, but different situations and different considerations.
Sure. So the context is different. So I think when they talk about democracy and in many of the language in education, it's about giving students a voice, and very often do we give opportunities for students to have a voice in what they want to learn and how they want to learn. In the project we saw yesterday in the UK with the graduate students from international background, Professor Wood gave them a voice, right? Because in the focus group discussion, he interviewed them and asked them how did they want to learn research methodology at the university and in Britain, and so so that sort of thing. In that, so very often even in university, sometimes you don't ask students how they want to learn, or even things like assessments. How they want to be assessed. We just decide for them and say this is how you will be assessed in order to do that. So is it negotiated? When we design a course at university, do we design a course that's tentative? On the first day of class, we go in and then we negotiate. This is what we will do, what we will not do, and how assessments will be done. So again, in that sense, even in higher education, I think because of the Asian context, I think it's some of the issues of that. Because remember that he's borrowing from the West, John Dewey's ideas. So he's trying to get Western ideas into Japanese schools, right? Which is that. So again, there's also those issues. What does democracy look like in the West, and what does democracy look like in the East? I think there's a lot of need for thinking about that. So this is her observation. But her observation is not wrong, because in any innovation, in any kind of thing you want to do in the schools, in the early years of its implementation, it is often done in a very superficial, shallow way, usually, So it's not deep, it's not rooted. Okay, remember, Japan has over 100 years of lesson study. Singapore, just about 14 years. Taiwan, how many years of opening classroom? 2011, right? 7 years, 8 years? lesson study. Right, so it's very short history. So of course that's one of the things that we work towards more, as I think a question that came out, sustainability and quality that we discussed yesterday. All right, so this is an observation. Okay, I will now talk a little bit about listening. That the learning community is constructed. If you want to have a community, listening is core. Dialogue is core. All right? So dialogic communication is really about listening. So you have to listen to others' voice in order to collaborate. So when he talk about learning, his view of learning is that when students learn, they dialogue with the materials, the tasks, the texts. They dialogue with others. Like in this case, sometimes you discuss with others, but you also dialogue with yourself, right? So Nancy went back and had dialogue with herself about what she learned yesterday and went into all the website to find out. So she had a dialogue with herself and trying to make sense of some of the things that she was exposed to yesterday. So that's what she was having, this dialogue. And later, once you have a dialogue with us about her questions in her own exploration. So she will raise those questions. Right. So again, we see this, which I think we've already done that. So maybe we'll skip this because I realize that many of you are not in the schools. Let's say, maybe we do this activity. Let's say that if you have a school as learning community, according to the ideas that Sato talked about, children learn together, teachers learn together, parents learn together, how does this look like in your school? Okay, so we have teachers, primary school teachers, but maybe those of you who are not working with schools, how does it look like when you were in school? Okay? How do you see that in your own school? I know some of you may be school maybe 30 years ago. For me, it's like almost 50 years ago, 60 years ago, no, 50 years ago, right? So try to go back and think of your schools. So maybe you discuss, all right, what you think, and you can use this to write your deliberation, and maybe we can just put it up. But we have whiteboards for them to write. Can they write there? Can they write there? They can write on that board. So you can go to any of the boards and write to describe your experience of your school, what you think it looked like, if you want, and how will you look like in the future. In other words, what is the current reality and what is it that you want to look like in the future, okay? So you can use the board, okay, to draw diagrams about the school, what it looked like, you know, in your school, and how would you like it to look like. We are doing this slide, all right? The activity is on this slide. So answer the 2 questions. How does this look like in your school, and how would you like this to look like in your school?
乖乖的。
你的 language 学的心态。
对，看那个，所以都不用跟他商量。所以我会觉得，哎，我给你比较民主化，让你知道有比较，就你都给我抗拒。那些老师让你 no choice， 我们就是这样做。因为他们不知道他们要什么。像我觉得我们尤其我们在大学端要的东西，就是他们现在年轻
系，你看一半以上都不知道为什么要选这个科系，他只是觉得帮他选，看起来不错，不了解，所以你有时候你给他太多选择，他的选择就是我方便就好，你少叫我动点脑筋，少一点作业，少点 homework 就好。所以像我们在改这些东西的时候，我就觉得，像我们系上，我们就不太会给他选择太，因为现在年轻人给他选择越多，他也不知道选什么，那就会有几个意见领袖出来。可是那些现在的小孩子，我就觉得，就少一点功课啊，少一点什么啊就好了。他们不知道他们到底要什么。以前我们可能念到大学，大家都知道未来方向的嘛，可能也不是很 make sure， 可是至少那个 goal 是在的，就说我念餐饮管理，就是我要做什么。现在很多，现在
对未来很茫然，
他就走。没有，你就问他，
然后也不能说未来可以马上遇到什么就做什么这样就。
对，你就问他为什么要进来，比如说他不进厨房，我们学校有很多必修课，他说不能拿刀，我说不能拿刀，那为什么念餐饮系？
真的吗？不能拿刀啊，
不能够杀生。
对，不能见习。
他们有很多很奇怪的理由不做很多事，像现在很多，像我的课程是需要穿服祭服的，就是标准的那种服装的。那现在很多女生不要穿裙子啊，她就有点像穿高领那样子，
就是觉得
就不要。
没有穿裙子，有些女生会觉得不方便，穿长裤其实很方便。
那有些是不穿的，他告诉你，他从哪里开始就不穿裙子。
对，性别取向，还有就是
有些蛮多是这样子的。那你说你要不要硬性？你硬性规定他就那个，那我就觉得说，那我不能这么多人啊，一个人跟我说不穿，两个人跟我说不穿，那我怎么办？因为我的标准都是一样，就是要穿，但是你可以多买件长裤备用。裙子还是要买。万一现在是女生，大家都买。那如果到底要不要穿裙子上我的课？班上表决，女生同意，班上女生同意你不用穿裙子就可以了。因为大部分女生因为穿裙子很不方便，要穿高跟鞋嘛。
对。
然后发现很多学生会怕穿高跟鞋，因为对他们来讲是很不舒服的。
没有规定要穿高，也没有几公分。我其实觉得穿高跟鞋真的很虐待女性。
可是后发现，女生就爱穿啊，没事她还穿高跟鞋，她觉得穿高跟鞋很漂亮啊。
喜欢的喜欢，不喜欢的不喜欢，这是很两个样子。
他们还要解释给别人听。
对啊，
真的吗？
解释。
那个是你的 interdiscipline。
OK。教育体系，所以你
对，这应该是学习上的。
自动控制 PLC 这边开始。
对，所以有很多领域都缩写不一样。他这个 lesson study， 他那个 lesson study 讲到 PL 什么 C 什么 plan 什么。
C 应该是 community。
对 ，C 应该是 community， 还有什么什么 do 什么什么 C。哎，你们管理学不是讲那个 PDCA 吗？你说类似的概念。
不一样，我觉得应该不是 PDCA。
可是我觉得概念很像啊。
通常都是那个 learning community。
对，然后它也是要 plan， 我是讲它那个过程也是有 plan， 然后 do， 然后 see， 然后最后一个
reflective，
它是一个 A 吧，它后面好像是一个 A 的。
没有，它不是 redo，reflective 这个字。
是要修正，对吧？其实理念都差不多的。
但是它只是修正，因为你从前面发现问题这边修正，可是我们这边加去 reflective，
就只是要反思而已。你反思的目的也是要再修正的。
但是看你要不要修正。我们不一定要修正，你看你要不要修正。
其实 audit 是去看，然后做检讨。那如果你下次要再执行，就一定会修正。
所以他会再跑到。
对。所以它这个其实也是类似啊，你那个对你的那个 reflection 之后还是，我觉得都很类似。
只是你那个用的词是什么？
对，所以我觉得你理论多看了之后，你会 confuse， 因为大家 overlap 的部分很多。
那可能这是多讲一点，或是多推一点。
对。
可能像他们教育有某一块东西就很强调，我们可能管理的可能就这一块就这样子。
就不太懂，我是念管理的，所以就有些不太会这么做。
所以我们只是名词不熟悉，其实很多学习的那个，因为人嘛，你就是学习的过程一定都很类似，只是大家看到可能我注重这一点，你注重那一点。
你就负责写就对了。
这写都是老师要讲，因为是你的领域哦，是那个社区发展。
他很 nice。你后来参加就会发现，这个学校的老师因为学教育很友善，都很友善。
像我们都带，
就是像我们是外校来，他们只要是这个学校老师都会负责帮忙带，即使他不是主办单位。因为我来参加2、3次，每次都觉得这学校老师好棒。对，你如果去别的学校参加比方说那是气管系办的我是什么经济系的老师好，然后那是他们气管系所以我来我就是纯参加。他们不会
比较会小群体在一起。
对，因为他们都是学教育的，就把大家都当新来的。真的不一样。每次来参加就会觉得很舒服。
都要自己检讨一下，自己是有犯了这样的错。
因为有些时候，有时候你不会是主办者，然后你不觉得每个系所的那种
就很本位
对，
就是因为大家都太独立、太自由了。
而且你也没什么机会认识其他人。
哦，是啊。华语文中心。
对。
那你都教华语里面的什么课啊？除了语言学概论，还教什么？华语教学。
都有，因为我是华文系毕业的，主要是语言学领域而已。
文学不分中英文。
对，因为语言学是所有的语言学感觉。
就是语言的架构绕道一讲，它应该是有一个架构，它可以分析中文或分析英文。只是因为我们现在读的原文书都是以英文为主，那大部分的历史。
这种架构都是确定的，就是泛用。
就是语言学家试着找出共通的架构，然后来解释语言里头的
东西。
对。放诸四海皆准。
就大家都教同一套，然后那一套就是我们只要用这一套，其实就可以。
其实也不是说同一套，就是语言它就是有声音啊，然后它就是有意义啊，它就是有句子啊，这个基本上大家都同意，那就是语言的结构。我们就是按照它的结构，一项一项来看。
跟他们一个在说不太懂。
那你应该很忙
Finish your discussion. Come back to your seats. Or stay at your board. Just stay at your board because you're going to. Because of time, we can't have everyone to share. Just stay at your board. Okay. Okay. Now, first of all, we'll get this board to present. Because they come from different culture, different contexts, I think that they decided to have Ruth from the Caribbean to share about schools in the Caribbean and her experience. So the rest of you can hear from her. So you can just walk up if you like and let's listen to Ruth. Okay, all of us, come and listen to Ruth from the Caribbean.
Hello. I'm from the Caribbean, but this is on Taiwan's context.
Oh, okay.
Right, so we used
Oh,
her
okay.
colleague. So she talked about her school. The classes were like about 35 students in a class, and it was really small. So I guess just area for the desk and chairs. So there was a lot of independent work that was done. Students might work in groups, but they always went back individually. So there was some group work, but the focus was mostly on independent work. And in terms of the parents, they would come to the school, but the discussion is basically with the teachers to find out how their students are doing. Yes, they would like to get involved, but it was like probably took time consuming for them, and they won't look and see what was going on in the classroom. Okay, and the focus was on students entering university. How would like it to be? Smaller class in terms of number, but more space so that you can have more group work. And we'll ask Brian to discuss these last 2 points.
Oh, in here it says parents come only to know what's going on. They don't know about LS or whatever. So the school needs to sell LS to the parents because it affects the children. Because as the teachers get better, because of their involvement, it plows into their students. So, and also what is success? Is entering to university the only success? Are there other paths to success? Don't you want the children to be millionaires like Okanu? Or losing job like that? So, some parent education.
Okay, so I think the idea about selling LS to parents, something that we haven't discussed over the last day and a half, and I think that's very important. For many of the countries that are starting to do lesson study, I think we need to explain to parents what we are doing. I think we don't do enough of this, all right? So we just ask them permission, oh, your children will be observed by other teachers, but that's all. But we don't explain to them, and maybe give them even a lesson study workshop and say, it is what we are trying to do as teachers. And hopefully that it will improve our capacity. When it improves our capacity, our children will do better. That's what we are trying to do. So this is something I think many schools, countries implementing this do not do enough of. I think that's a very good point that was raised. Okay, so again, class size, space, all right? I'll show some photos in Japan in terms of class size and space, and yet they still do school as learning community. All right, so we're going to see that. So this is an example of Lola, right? Lola's in Taiwan and presented by Ruth from the Caribbean. And then I think that's another one, where it's also Taiwanese school. So maybe let's see whether it's similar or different. And she is sharing from her daughter's experience of primary school as a teacher and a parent. She listens to the daughter, and she's telling her daughter's experience of school. So let's see what they have to say. And Sarah's going to share this on her behalf. Yeah. So it's wonderful to hear from Sarah because her daughter's experience was many years ago, right? And she's recollecting her daughter's experience, and that's what it was in the past. And the international students that you have been going to schools and observing schools, and their report shows that you are moving in the continuum, right? You're moving from teacher-centeredness to student-centeredness. You're moving from independent work to more collaborative work, and so on and so forth. So there is some movement on that continuum. So this is the report from your international students who have recently just gone to your school. So that's really very interesting to hear from them. All right? Okay, let's hear from our college professors. So let's get maybe one college group to share because of time. So we hear from the two schools. Let's hear from the college professors what they thought, the reality. Maybe, you know, anybody wants to share at the college level? Dora, okay.
Okay, well, at first we try to think about how we can do in our elementary school, but that's an ancient story, so we don't want to remind ourselves with that. That's why we come up with what can we do with LS in the college or university level. And our group is actually have professors come from different backgrounds. We have from hotel management, and we have the professors from fashion design, and we'll also have a professor from technology management. So we were thinking, how can we group these different diverse professors together to really implement LS? Then we think about we can maybe form interdisciplinary courses that has different departments to join. So we have the same theme of teaching, and each department actually work on their own professional knowledge to build on the courses. So for example, if we have a courses on community development, and then how can Chinese language department contribute to this project? Then we are thinking, in Chinese department we have Chinese culture, so we can have these cultural courses that help the project to build the community design or something. And then we can have city design department from fashion design to okay. Well, maybe to figure out how can we build up the community in terms of their design. And we can also have our hotel management to put their professional knowledge in. So that's what we think we can do LS on that for teachers. And for students, of course, they can join the courses to learn how to really produce the products out of these courses. But it's really hard for us to imagine parents joining, because at college level, parents usually are busy, and students are really an independent individuals. So we leave that part out.
So at the college level, then, of course, you don't see it as a school, because school as learning community is an organization, because this is at the college level. But I think some of the dimensions of Sato's philosophy can infiltrate or be part of what they're trying to do. So the collaboration among colleagues would be, of course, the lesson study way of doing it at the college level. Okay, let's hear from the other college group. There's another group. Was it Nancy's group? Yeah. Okay.
We will talk from the university level. This is the reality and this is the idea. For students, they learn together as it is now, because they maybe take the same course, and the professor will assign some teamwork for them to do, so they learn together. And in our university, students can choose a topic of their common interest and form professional learning community, and the university will give them some money to do that, but it's not many. And for teachers, we also have PLC, but also not very many. And sometimes we will have speech and workshop, like this workshop, so we can all learn together if we are all interested in lesson study. And for parents, none. And the idea is that maybe we can have a matching platform for university students. So they say, oh, I'm interested in, for example, better my English ability. Then they can form a interest group. Yeah, so we were thinking about having a matching platform for students and professors. And for parents, we are thinking maybe the university can provide some online resources. For example, the career trend. For example, for us, it's teacher education. So if there is some change in terms of the system, that sort of thing, we can use online, yeah, to share some information and maybe they can have some discussion or question asked. Yeah. Thank you.
So this is a very interesting idea because we talk about involving parents, right? About parents learning together. So the university provide courses for parents to learn. So I thought that was an interesting idea. So you hear from the university professors different perspective. They cannot employ it the way that the school teachers were trying to do. So it is done in a very different sort of interpretation of Sato's philosophy. All right, so let's just move on before we have a bit of a break, before we move on. Okay, oops. Okay, this is just to show you. This, again, like Taiwanese school and in the university, also in Singapore, we are moving towards collaborative learning. And in our Singapore schools, I want you to look at the faces of the children in our Singapore schools learning together. These are pictures that I've taken of the schools that I go to. This again of children learning together. I want you to look at the faces of the children. And I want you to compare the faces of the children learning together in Singapore schools with Japan schools. This is Professor Akita shared this with us, and these are Japanese students working together. Okay, I want you to look at their faces. I also want you to look here in the group work that they do and look at their faces. Okay, what differences do you see about Singapore children learning together? They are in groups, they are learning together. And the Japanese children are also in groups and they're learning together. What differences do you see from these photos? Anyone? What do you notice? Huh? Smiling faces, yeah. So you find that Singapore students are very serious and focused and want to complete the task, whatever the teacher has assigned to them, you know. So that was really very interesting for me when I took the photo and I look at their faces and say, yeah, there are some differences in that, okay? So you find that. But also I think the culture of group and working together is the relationship among the students, you know. And when I look at some of the vision statement of Japanese schools, in one primary school, the vision statement say that all we want for our children is to be happy and to make friends in the elementary school. So that was what the vision statement is. So all the classroom activities was to help children to relate well to one another and make good friends, as well as enjoy learning science. So when they talk about learning science in that particular school, it was to enjoy learning science. It was not to learn science to get an A in the exam. All right. So I think there's also a difference in the way about the joy of learning that I see between our two schools. So we're trying to move more towards that kind of culture of the joy of learning. Okay, obviously we saw our teachers learning together. We see more of that. So even in Japan, I see a lot of teachers in the lesson study groups. And this is parent involvement. The example I shared with you was one case, but it wasn't a lesson study case. It was just involving parents in the school activity, in the school field trip. But this one, when I went to the school, oops, sorry. Okay, when I went to the school, this is the parent, okay? And I was observing a gymnastic class. So in the gymnastic class, the parent observed. That's what that was raised by Akari. Akari raised about parents observing lessons. So we haven't done this in Singapore yet. We haven't involved parents. So you see parents and, you know, and not only do they just observe, the parent was involved in the discussion, you know. So I thought that was also interesting. All right. So parents, as you some said, in some of us are parents ourselves. We're educators. The school can see us as a resource, right, and involve us as a resource rather than see us as troublesome. Right, and troublesome and monsters, you know, because we ask too many questions. All right, so again, you see this parent observing and having part of the discussion. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, parents just come to observe, that's it. But I also saw that you went one step further, okay, being involved with discussion. Okay, so I think we have a bit of a break, maybe 5 minutes break, before I start the next session on listening pedagogy. Okay, all right.